Good day, everyone, and welcome to the 7th webinar in our series on implementing the standard. It also happens to be Pink Shirt Anti-Bullying Day, so I hope that everyone's wearing their pink. I am your host today. My name is Samantha Kolopak, and I'm with the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And I'm here today with Sharone Bar David, a leading expert on workplace incivility, and Emma Pavlov, Senior Vice President of Human Resources for the University Health Network, which is a medical center that comprises of 4 hospitals affiliated with U of T. Welcome to you both, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. We're delighted to be here.
Indeed.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to be here, and I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of background on our speakers. Sharone Bar David is the president of Bar David Consulting, a firm that specializes in creating a respectful work environment through training and consulting. Sharone is equipped with a law degree and a master's of social work, and she is a regular contributor to the Canadian HR Reporter magazine, so you may have read some of her work there. Currently, she is hard at work completing her upcoming book called Trust the Canary, Every Leader's Guide to Taming Workplace Incivility. Emma Pavlov is the Senior VP of Human Resources for the University Health Network. During a 30-year career, Emma has led HR for prominent organizations in both the private and public sectors. Emma holds an MBA, and she teaches at Schulich School of Business at York University and is a frequent public speaker as well. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks again.
So just a few housekeeping items for everyone. A quick reminder to please ask your questions by typing into the chat box, which is at the right-hand side of your screen. And please send your questions to all participants, or they may not be answered. You can always send your question, to me directly, and we can get to that at a later time. So if we don't get to your question, please don't worry. You can always email us, and we will definitely respond to you. So let's get right down to the agenda. First, we're going to talk a little bit about what civility is and what workplace incivility, harassment, and bullying look like. Together, we're going to discuss the impacts and effects that incivility at work has. And then Emma is also going to share a story that actually highlights the University Health Network experience and their journey in creating a workplace that's psychologically healthy and safe. So just before I turn it over to our speakers, I thought that I would just address with everybody why we chose today's topic. And we have received some feedback from participants asking sort of why, the standard is, being implemented, and also taking a closer look at one of the central themes in the standard. And so we thought this would be a great way to interact with everybody. And in previous webinars, we actually started to discuss the 13 workplace factors that affect psychological health and safety. And one of the central workplace factors in the standard is actually civility and respect. So it's important to remember that these 13 factors can positively impact worker mental health and psychological health, safety, and participation, and that the standard actually states that it's important to remember that civility and respect would be important, that people are treating with everybody with consideration, that organizations are effectively handling conflicts. Workers from all backgrounds, of course, they need to be treated fairly in the workplace, and that organizations actually have effective ways of addressing appropriate behavior by customers or clients. So perhaps as I'm just sort of ensuring that everybody's on the same page of our slides, I'll ask that Sharone and Emma please walk us through the connection of this topic.
Okay, we're happy to do that. As I have to laugh because we actually can't see the screen at all, so we're going to figure it out here, flying as we go. So Bar David Consulting is a company that does training, as you said, Sam, and over the years of teaching about respect in the workplace, I have shifted from being interested in harassment slowly to looking at the area of incivility, which is off the radar screen for many organizations and HR professionals, health and safety professionals, and became more and more interested in learning about and teaching about the impact that incivility has on organizations and on people. And so seeing that the standard has now made this one of the 13 key axes, if you will, to me, and I know that to Emma as well, she'll speak to that, is thrilling, because that reflects the journey that I've come, along with the many participants in our workshops, in realizing the total importance to this, to business and to organizations. So that's been part of our journey, and Emma, perhaps you can pick up from here.
Okay, I think first it's important to know that University Health Network, which is the organization that I work with, is an academic health sciences center, or a network of teaching hospitals in downtown Toronto. We have the Princess Margaret Hospital, Toronto General Hospital, the Toronto Western, and Toronto Rehab. We have about 15,000 employees, and then we have another few thousand people engaged as volunteers, students, and physicians on top of that. We have been on a journey to create or develop the kind of workplace environment that we think is healthy and promotes well-being of our people. And we've been on this journey for about 10 years now, and I think as we go through the presentation, I will touch on this journey, and I will be able to articulate why this is so important to us, and why civility and respect is something that really, really matters to us, because it matters to our employees, and it matters to how they can work and deliver the kind of care that we want them to deliver. They need to have a certain environment that is inclusive, caring, and civilized. So that's how we sort of started this journey.
And I think that throughout the presentation, we're going to touch on the fact that although UHN is a big organization, many of the things that you've gone through in your journey can be done in smaller organizations in different ways as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's critical.
So maybe we can start with what is civility, as you've come to define it at UHN.
Okay. We have defined civility, as you see here, as showing respect, care, and consideration for all the people that you're working with. It's recognizing the inherent value of each person, and recognizing that we are going to have disagreements, but having disagreements while maintaining everyone's dignity is critical to our environment. So that's how we define civility here in our workplace.
Which leads us to looking at how can we define workplace incivility. And borrowing from a definition that was developed by Christine Pearson and Christine Porath, who are the key researchers in this area, I've come to define it as a definition that carries, in a way, three elements to it. One is we're looking at behaviors that are seemingly insignificant or seemingly inconsequential. They're not things that are blatantly, in-your-face disrespectful. But these behaviors, and this is the second element, are rude, discourteous, insensitive, disrespectful, along those lines. And the issue with incivility, and what makes it so slippery and hard to nail down, is the intent factor, the fact that you have ambiguous or unclear intent to harm. And what kinds of behaviors are we looking at here? We're looking at behaviors that are in any workplace, such as anything from eye-rolling, the belittling of other people's experiences, or the belittling of other people's experiences or skills or expertise. We could be looking at dismissive body language, not only eye-rolling, but for example, in hospitals, oftentimes people make all kinds of hissing sounds and sounds with their lips. sarcasm that is directed at people. You can be looking at the rude use of technology, what I call the RUT, the rude use of technology, and a host of other behaviors where it's really unclear if the person is intending to harm or not intending to harm. And did you want to add anything, Emma? And again, we apologize if we're not in complete sync with the slides because we're actually, for some reason, disconnected from the slides.
But I'm getting
so hopefully Sam in Calgary is managing all of that for us. So, Emma, did you want to add anything about the definition of workplace incivility from your perspective?
Not really much to add to what you said. I think that I'll be able to add a lot more concrete data as we go through the presentation.
So one of the most confusing things, including for people who are many years, say, in human resources, is how do you differentiate between various forms of bad behavior at work? So after reading a lot and hearing a lot and reflecting a lot, I think that we can look at a continuum of bad behavior that runs from incivility through harassment into bullying and into physical violence. And I think it would be fair to preface by saying that not necessarily everyone is agreeable on definitions. So you can have varying definitions across academics, especially around the area of bullying. You can have various definitions across provinces, countries, and even organizations. So at the bottom, at least severe and typically unaddressed in organizational policies is incivility, and those are the kinds of insignificant behaviors that we just talked about. More severe and subject to legislation and human rights legislations, etc., is harassment that can generally be defined as comprising of offensive, unwelcome behavior that a reasonable person ought to know could be perceived as such or certainly be unwelcome. Harassment typically can be one event or a number of events over time. Next in severity is bullying, and in my work going across organizations, I'll often say in a room full of people, so what do you think has to be there in a behavior in order for us to call it bullying? And I can tell you, and I'm sure all participants on this webcast probably have similar experiences, it's really hard to know. So generally speaking, across academics, there is an agreement that bullying is a patterned, persistent behavior over time. If it's not patterned, it's not persistent, or it's not over time, then we might as well call it harassment. But bullying is the persistent, ongoing behavior where one side feels, for whatever reason, unable to protect themselves effectively. So it can be, of course, from a manager downward, but it can also be what's called horizontal or mobbing, or it can be even from an employee or someone lower in the organizational hierarchy towards someone above them. Now, there's a lot of confusion. Sometimes things can look just like incivility. For example, the marginalizing of someone through gossip. And I think I forgot to say earlier, gossips and cliques and exclusion is a classic example of incivility. And so you can have something that looks like incivility, marginalizing someone, but for that person, the experience really amounts to bullying because on a regular basis, their experience is an experience of ostracism, which generates cortisone and adrenaline in the body and impacts on certain areas in the brain that now we are aware of. So for that person, anxiety attacks will ensue, sickness, and an inability to do their work. So for them, it's a bullying experience, while on the surface it looks just like incivility. And I know, Emma, that you've had at UHN some interesting experiences with these confusions.
We actually find that most people consider all disrespectful behavior as bullying. Most of the time when I hear directly from staff, they feel that everything that they're experiencing is bullying. But when we look closer at the the experiences or at what they're seeing. And also when we analyzed a survey that we conducted where people said that they were bullied, what we found was that in most cases, actually, it was incivility. It was behavior that we would consider as disrespectful or incivil. And because of, you know, the media's attention to bullying in society, very often people feel that any disrespectful behavior is bullying. On the flip side, I would say, though, that what we found, even though the behavior may be what we now know is incivil behavior, that caused a lot of stress for employees. It still caused a lot of stress for the employee, in other words, it had an effect on them. And we also found that if incivil behavior was left to fester, it often grew to become actually more harassment or bullying, and it certainly affected the employee. I'd like to actually tell you about a story that, or an email that I received from one of our nurses that I think was really critical to the beginning of my journey in this area, because it really touched me. It made me see how much this mattered. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to read you this email that I received from a nurse. And this is what she said to me. She said, "Dear Emma, I want you to know that I'm leaving UHN, as others have done, and for the same reasons, being bullied and harassed at work. I can guarantee you that I'm an excellent professional with high commitment to this organization and our patients. I come to work energized, dedicated to what I have to do for the day, and my patients appreciate my work. But at the end of the day, I go home broken and depressed. You know why? Because of the way some of my team members treat me. They shout, belittle, and gossip. I did raise this with my manager, but she did nothing. I spoke with an HR person, and they too were unable to help. The situation was so out of control and processes so slow and bureaucratic that it was causing me more harm than good. So I'm leaving. But I want you to know, Emma, that UHN is losing good people and maintaining bullies." So that really touched me and gave me pause, and I thought about this lost opportunity. There were so many places where appropriate interventions would have been helpful, and we really lost a good person and a great opportunity to turn this around prior to the individual feeling that she has to leave. Let me just touch on, if I can see the slide. Let me just touch on about this lost opportunity, how I see it. First of all, although we all believe that we're pretty clear about our workplace expectations, we actually did not have a strong, well-articulated communication shared by senior management that showed commitment, an organizational commitment to the kind of workplace environment we really wanted to have here at UHN.
And I think that that's often the first step that's missed, is that organizational commitment. And a number of you have sent questions in before the session, and quite a number of the sessions said, well, how do you get that commitment? What do you do with that? And really, without that, you can do things on the ground in smaller teams, but without the larger commitment, especially if you're a smaller organization, people feel it, and it's going to be very hard to make the change.
Yeah. Another lost opportunity was around policies. Although we had a policy, I would say that we didn't have a very clear policy that defined acceptable behavior, that defined expectations. That was also a lost opportunity that we needed to pay attention to.
And had you had clear policies, listeners would have been able to know more clearly where to go and what to do.
what kind of help she could have accessed. We also found that if we would have assessed the workplace, we would have known more that she wasn't the only one feeling that way. So we didn't have, a methodology or a priority to assess the workplace. It became very evident as soon as we started looking at this situation that our managers needed to build their capacity in this area. Managers are not born always knowing how to handle disrespectful behavior or bullies, and they sometimes shy away from confronting people. So that was another lost opportunity in this story, in that our managers were not clear about their roles, responsibilities, and we didn't support them enough. I'm sure you see that all the time, Sharone.
Yeah, the managers really is, if one were to choose one place where it's at, is the managers. And for the managers, they really need 3 key skills. One is to model it. And you and I have talked about the fact that that's key. When they don't model it, then they have no moral authority to do anything. And everyone knows that it's a charade anyway. Don't give us a great policy, but if my direct manager doesn't model it, then that's going to go nowhere in a hurry. So the first competency there is the modeling and the self-reflection. And the second one is the ability to diagnose. So to diagnose correctly, am I looking at incivility? Am I looking at harassment? Am I looking at bullying? And the third competency is to take action. And these 3 build on top of each other, and that's huge. And with a nurse like that, as she said to you in her email, I went to my manager, but my manager couldn't do anything, didn't do anything. The manager was incompetent, so it didn't do much for her. That was a missed opportunity.
It was. It could have been that the manager was well-intentioned but really didn't know what to do. And in addition to that, the HR people were also, they also lacked the capability on knowing how to handle the situation and to intervene with this nurse in this situation. That was also another gap that we found. In addition to all of that, the manager and the HR person are 2 people here, but the nurse herself also lacked the ability to know how to handle this. She wasn't empowered, or she didn't have the tools or the knowledge of what action she can take in order to help herself.
And there's always the issue of the observers. What do observers do or say when you have situations, whether it's incivility, whether it's harassment or bullying? You have a lot of people who just want to mind their own business or look at the situation and don't know what to do. Their canary, what I call their inner canary, that gut feeling tells them that something doesn't feel right, but they don't know what to do. There isn't empowerment there. And so you're looking at a whole unit and saying, who do we have here that can help?
So that brings us to the next point, which actually focuses on the tools for addressing incivility. So we didn't have any tools that the nurse could use, that her manager was able to use, or that the observers or her teammates could have used in order to address this incivility. And we certainly didn't have any clear consequences or remedies for helping this nurse. So there's no doubt in my mind that we failed her, and the whole system really failed here. And that lost opportunity really created an impetus within us to really want to do something about developing the workplace in such a way that civility and respect would become a cultural norm here, and the way that we want to behave and the way that we want to live here at UHN.
So when we're looking at someone like this who left, that's our first impact that we know that happens, and that is that you get increased turnover, and you've started looking at what are the prices that you're paying for incivility.
Yeah. And we looked at it very carefully. We really assessed our environment, and we found, I mean, the nurse was one example, and she even referred us to a number of other people that left for the same reason. So little doubt that this leads to incivility and disrespectful behavior leads to departures, and very often departures are very good people. Little doubt that this stress in the team led to decrease in productivity, increase in absenteeism. This nurse herself told me that she was absent quite a lot before she made the decision to leave because of being stressed in the workplace. There's obviously a decrease in the commitment that you have to that organization. When we look at our benefits costs, I believe that there's an increase in certain drugs, and therefore the benefits are up. Same with EAP utilization. I think if you take a look at your EAP utilization, you might be able to identify that also as a factor. Here for us, interprofessional teamwork is really, really important. We work very much on a team-based model in order to care for a patient, and there is a decrease in teamwork across the professions within the team. And needless to say, there's quite a bit of an increase in the stress in the workplace when you're working in an environment where you feel that you're being disrespected. And when you look at these, that's how I built my business case, quite frankly. That was my best way of showing senior management why this matters. Sharone, I think you've done some work to show that we are not so unique here.
Yeah, so in 2011, or was it in 2011, together with the HR Reporter magazine, and they've been fantastic in doing surveys. We've done a survey on incivility, and then last year I did with them a survey on abrasive leadership. What does abrasive leadership cost, and what are its effects in Canada? That's another area of interest for me. But with incivility, we asked, so this is not a scientific sample in that it's not a controlled sample, but the HR Reporter put out to its readers, and 308 of them responded across Canada, across industries. And we were curious. We asked a number of questions about what have you noticed? And later in the webinar, we'll offer the opportunity to send you the article that summarizes the findings. The finding for now that completely substantiates what the UHN experience has been is that people across Canada said the following. The question that we posed to them was, have you seen, does incivility have, from your observations, has it had a strong negative effect on ... And then we asked them, has it had a strong negative effect on productivity? And a whopping 92% said that they either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that it had a strong effect. The collaboration that we asked here was about inter-team collaboration, and that relates to Emma's point about interprofessional. Again, 90%. So folks who are in HR across Canada are saying in such numbers, yes, I agree, either somewhat or strongly, that incivility has a strong effect on these indicators. Absenteeism, 80%. So that speaks to our nurse. She misses a day. HR sees it. They tell us in the survey. Almost 80%, 4 out of 5 people feel that they lost people. And all this is exactly reflected in that nurse story. Customer service suffers. So, of course, customer service will suffer if you have someone who is upset. They're not going to give the same attention to the customer. They might make mistakes. And your brand reputation suffers when people see that or experience your people being uncivil. And what's striking is that despite these huge numbers, still incivility flies under the radar, which is why the standard is a great advancement for us, the new national standard, because it says it does matter. It does matter. And our Canadian findings are very much in correlation with what Pearson and Poras, the two researchers I alluded to earlier, found, and they published a book, and have been published in the Harvard Business Review. And I originally, if you look at these numbers, I was very skeptical about some of these numbers because I thought, you must be kidding. It can't be that 1 out of 2 people will purposely, the first bullet is not just that they lowered their work effort, they purposely lowered their work effort. 1 out of 2 people will purposely decrease their time at work. What could that be? That could be that you just don't stay the extra time, or you just take a longer break, or it could be that you're taking a day off.
Your
2 out of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it reflects the lack of commitment to the organization.
And indeed, 78%, if you bullets down, 4 out of 5 people said, I had lower commitment to the organization. So as I was saying, I honestly did not believe these numbers. I said, after all, we're talking about little incivility. What are we talking about? But in my sessions over the last, my training sessions on incivility over the last, I think it's almost 3 years that I've been doing this, I ask participants to guess. I say, what percent of people do you think purposely lower their work commitments? And group after group, individual after individual, come up with numbers that are very, and in fact, some people feel this is too much. Especially look at the last item, which was people who admitted to taking their frustration out on a customer. And it's interesting, in one of the sessions that we held here, UHN partnered last year with 4 other organizations, I think it was, and there was a big project, and Bar David Consulting offered the sessions. And we had a whole discussion about taking out frustration on a customer, which in healthcare is patients.
Exactly.
And people here said something interesting. They said, we think it's higher than 25% because if a nurse is in the nurse's station and she or he are upset by some gossip and incivility or some sound that someone makes with their lips towards them, she leaves that room and she goes to deal with the family, and she doesn't even know that emanating from her cells, from her DNA, if you will, is this curt, short thing. And then this is what your manager said. Then the family comes to complain to the manager and says, your nurse is rude.
Yeah.
But if then the nurse doesn't even know that she took it out on a family.
Yeah.
So is that kind of corresponds with your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it corresponds with our experience. We always say we have to take care of our staff so that they can take care of their patients. And if we are not treating them well, or they feel within their team that they're not being treated well, then it's hard to believe that they can go and treat well patients or their families. And I think
sorry to interrupt there. So Sharone and Emma, we did get a question from our audience, and it was just a question on who are the perpetrators of incivility. So I was wondering if you could address that, because I know you have been talking about instances. Is everyone can everybody be a perpetrator of incivility? And then the other thing, I just wanted to let you know with a few of our technical difficulties today that you do have the host privileges, so you can move your slides ahead as you see fit.
Yes, we found that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I found that.
Technical is not our strength of either of us. So thank you for that wonderful question. Who does incivility? You, me, them, everybody. Everybody that's human does it.
Yeah.
The only difference is how much do we do it? Do we try to own it? Are we open to feedback when somebody tells us that we are? What I find often in sessions, people say they, and then I say, well, who here is a sinner? Who here has done this list in the last 24 to 48 hours? And everyone raises their hand. So it's human, and a lot of us do it. In a moment, we'll talk about the enabling belief.
I can't agree with you more. It's every single person that is here, all 20+ thousand people here. Every single one of us is disrespectful at some point. So I can't add more than that.
So
go ahead.
That's why it's important, as we call this presentation, building it into your DNA, because how do you build into the DNA systems that make it less and that help people like our nurse have remedies and solutions? So part of why incivility happens so much and does persist and why solutions aren't offered is because in the background you have beliefs that are pulsating in a way that enables them. So here are 5 beliefs that are very popular. There are many others. So one is, it's the nature of the industry. So, well, we're in construction. In construction, you've got to be rough. Or we're in healthcare. We don't have time. You know, we're dealing with life and death, right, Emma?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We don't have enough resources. We're stressed. We're too busy. It's the nature of healthcare to be like that.
Yes, to be like that. So the minute you say that, it becomes obscure, and even managers aren't able to see it, and senior leadership isn't able to see it. We're like a family here is another one. We know each other. We're like a family. We know where each other's sensitivities are. No, you don't. And as long as you believe that we're like family, you are really immediately sanctioning, especially in management.
The behavior.
You're sanctioning the behavior, right?
Sure.
You can't change a person's personality. That's one of my favorites. Well, so-and-so is rough at the edges. He's just a bit crusty. He's from the East. He's from the West. He's from another culture.
He doesn't mean any harm.
He doesn't mean any harm.
Yeah.
And that connects to number 5. People should get a thicker skin. When you believe that, it's true, you cannot change someone's personality, but as an organization, if you're going to commit to civility and respect, you have a right to say, we're not going to tell you to change your personality, but please check at the door the unpleasant, the disagreeable parts of your personality when you enter our premises. You can pick them up when you leave at the end of your shift.
Exactly.
And then there's the gender-based, women will always gossip, or men will always be rough. And so it's very important as you assess your workplace, which Emma's going to be talking about in a little bit, as you assess your workplaces, what beliefs do you have that enable?
We have another question, Sharone, if I can just chime in on that gender-based one, and it was, what roles do sexes have, so men and women? Is one more likely to be the victim and one more likely to be the perpetrator, or have you, in your experience, you've seen both sides?
I've been both sides. Some of the research from Pearson and Porath suggests, and please don't kill the messenger, as they say, that men and women have different ways of getting even. So what we have with Incivility is the whole spiral effect. So you didn't say good morning to me, so, well, why should I say good morning to you? You belittled me, you made fun of me in front of somebody else and made my look work not good. Well, I'll give you a bit of your own medicine later, either consciously or not consciously. So what we do know about the genders as pertains to that spiral effect is that, and again, it's not me saying it, it's just what they found, is that men tend to respond very directly and immediately when they feel that they were dealt with incivility, and women tend to take slower. They tend to secure their base first, which often is done through talking to others, also known as gossip, or venting, or what have you, and then when the moment arrives, when they feel like they have all their ducks lined in a row, that's when they
lash out.
They lash out, or they give that back. And certainly, again, with the many workshops that I've been doing, it seems that many people think that that corresponds with what they see as well, give or take.
Articles.
So moving along, if you want us, there are a few articles we'd like to offer. If you want us to send you these articles after the session, and we'll see from the questions and answers there might be more materials that might be relevant to send. An article about that the HR reporter that we did, the incivility risk, an article about 3 beliefs from the HR reporter that I wrote, and also something about the confusion about bullying. So today we're talking about incivility, but a year and a half ago, returning from the conference, the International Conference in Bullying, I wrote a number of things about some of the confusions and some of the clarities about bullying. We'll be happy to share those. You see here, webinar at Mental Health Commission. Click it now and just say articles, and we'll send them to you in the next, hopefully, day. So let's move right along, because we want to really hear about your amazing journey here, Emma, at UHN. And I think it is possible to have the same journey even with a small organization, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I would say that size probably makes it a longer journey than it needs to be. But as I said earlier, we have been on a 10-year journey to build the civility and respect into the DNA, or to have it become an inherent part of our culture and how we work here. And we've had many initiatives that have propelled us or brought us to the kind of work we're doing today. So, for example, we built a business case to senior management that led to a policy that we call fostering respect in the workplace policy. We did that about 10 years ago. We developed, we had hundreds of employees participate in building a code of conduct for the organization. It's a code of conduct that is really being well ingrained into, I'd like to say, into our DNA for most people. It is something that is often referred to you hear people say things like, well, that behavior is not as per the code of conduct. It's posted in many places. And the code of conduct led us to develop team charters. So what that was, different departments contacted our HR or OD people and worked with them to develop a charter for their unit. In other words, how would the code of conduct apply to our unit? What are the commitments that we're making to each other? So these were team charters that were developed for different departments, our emergency department, our ORs or surgery areas. They all participated, the employees participated with our HR people and their managers, of course, to develop these team charters. We created what we call diversity councils, where people got together to talk about how to improve our culture, how to educate people, how to celebrate various improvements in our journey. We also developed a code of workplace ethics that is very clear about the expectations around behavior. We held, over the last 10 years, over the last 6 years, we held 2 what we call dialogue on race. These were groups of racialized or culturally diverse people that got together they really wanted to flag to management the impact that they felt around disrespectful behavior to them as opposed to people that were not racialized. And we listened to what they had to say and put together a number of initiatives to address some of their issues. For example, one of the requests they made and they thought would be helpful is that we develop an equity and inclusive statement that would be signed by myself and by the CEO and posted in strategic locations in our organization, which we've just done. We also conducted a survey. It was really interesting. At the time that we conducted the survey, I didn't even know enough to distinguish between incivility and bullying. And I called the survey a bullying survey. And within, I would say within a day and a half, we had 2,000 people respond to this survey. It was really something that was on everybody's mind. And it was in that survey that I realized what I said earlier, that most of the behavior that we considered inappropriate was really incivility, and really not what we would now know better and call something that we would call bullying. We also held when listening to the bullying survey, we also knew that some people didn't respond to the survey but may want to talk about experiences. So we also held a number of forums. They were led by, neutral people from the OD or the HR area, and it gave people an opportunity to talk about respect and civility in the workplace, so that it described our workplace in a way that we felt we needed to do something. Strategically, we needed to do more than what we've done, even though I think you can see here that we've done quite a bit.
And you have done quite a bit, and it is interesting that the whole issue of what's in a name, as we said in the agenda, because by calling something a certain name, if you call it bullying, you really, I advocate very strongly to keep the word bullying for, so to speak, special occasions.
Right.
Because we don't want to cheapen that word. When someone really is bullied, especially if they're in a targeted situation where they're targeted, they will become sick, they will fall sick, they often cannot come back to work. So beware of the labels that you give things, lest you begin creating a problem that then you cannot control just by the terminology that you use.
Excellent point, really, Sharone, because we hardly now have a need to use the word or the label bullying. We really focus very much on civility and respect. And we would like to give you a few minutes for questions. So this is, I think, our last slide. I just want to show you some of our more renewed focus, if I can call it that. As you know, civility and respect is one of the elements under the mental health standard that is critical to the workplace environment and to the well-being of staff. So based on the previous initiatives that I mentioned, this is what we've done more recently. First of all, we built a business case that we took to senior management to get their commitment, and I think that really, really helped us. So first of all, we got clear about the desired culture and workplace environment that we wanted to have here. We wanted to have a respectful, healthy, inclusive workplace, and we were very clear about that. We got input from staff to describe that environment, and we have a statement that describes it. We built senior leadership commitment using a very strong business case.
And I think you and I have spoken two things about this point. One is that it's very important to build this as a business case. Typically, organizations think of respect as either something they have to do because of legal issues or because, in good cases, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But really the way to, quote-unquote, sell it internally to really get something going, you've got to go the business case. Otherwise, you're not going to get the resources. You're not going to get the buy-in. And HR especially often tends to speak, or sometimes the language of it's good for people, and it's harder to sell that. And the other thing is, if you're going to build senior leadership commitment, and I'm going to be very blunt here, senior leadership better demonstrate it. There are too many situations, and a number of you have written this in the questions before the session. If the senior leaders are not going to demonstrate it visibly, then it's not going to happen. And don't even, bring training in that situation. It's shooting yourself in the foot in some way. So it's critical, the business case and the modeling there, and to pause until you have that down.
Yeah. And the cost implications of that we talked about earlier is part of that business case. Assessing the workplace and knowing where you are today is also very helpful, and it also was part of our business case. And based on all that input, we developed strategies. We developed, first of all, a very, very clear policy, a very, very clear policy, as well as a conflict resolution or complaint procedure, which is part of the policy. Very clear definitions about what harassment is, what bullying is, and so on. We are in the process of building HR capacity. We are educating HR in this area, and HR's role in this area is something that we're very focused on. We have a number of leadership development sessions, again, to educate people in this area. And I got to tell you, this is something that leaders are hungry for. We have just about every leader manager in this building signed up for our educational sessions in this area. It's because they see that happening all the time, but it is not a comfortable area for most people. It is not a comfortable area where they feel confident that they know how to handle and how to address. So increasing that capacity of your leaders is critical. We also worked really hard to empower people right on the ground so that people know how to address disrespectful behavior. And I'll show you in the next final slide just some examples of the tools that we have built that help both employees, managers, and as Sharone said, observers, in knowing how to handle or how to respond to incivility. And we've also developed a dedicated online website where we have all these resources, all the tools, all the resources, policies, complaint procedure, everything. We're also working hard to embed all of this in our regular HR organizational work. In other words, it's part of our leadership development program. It's part of our performance appraisal system. So it can't be sort of a standalone. It's embedded in all our other HR or people practices. And the final area that we are going to be focusing on now is identifying some indicators so that we can measure success going forward. And our last slide really is just to show you some examples of the tools that we have developed for our people. We have labeled this Respect and Civility at Work. Skill Up, Stand Up, and Speak Up is our logo for this, or our tagline. And this is an example of a toolkit that shows you, managers how to provide corrective feedback, and we use Sharone's expertise to help us develop these toolkits. There's another toolkit that...
and these are laminated so people can hold on to them, right? These are like real job aids that you're doing. They're
small. They're the same color as you see here. They're laminated, and they can flip them from their purse, their desk drawer very quickly. And here are some do's and don'ts that you could see that they also have. So don't contribute to gossip. Don't vent or get even with others. On the do's, offer a helping hand and monitor your body language, because you convey a lot in body language as well. So we have some for managers, some for employees, and one also for observers who see in civil behavior or two people interacting in a way that the observer says, oh my God, I got to say something. So we have 10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes for questions, and again, I want to emphasize that UHN put a lot of resources into it, but you can do a lot of this, and maybe, as Emma said, even in an easier way. If you don't have to have 15,000 people to do that. Not. And one of the things that you have, and I don't want to take room for the questions, but you have your Ask Emma forum where people can, on your internal website, send questions directly to Emma, and she anonymously, and she responds. So that's one way, with HR that is connected and trustworthy, you can get a lot done in the assessment field. Right. So we're open for questions.
Perfect. So one of our first questions is, do you think that team charters, which outline the civil and uncivil behavior, can actually help empower colleagues to talk openly?
I certainly think that yes. First of all, in the development of the charter, the manager and the employees are dialoguing together on how what kind of behaviors are expected in their workplace environment, and the charter helps them to build promises that they make to each other on how they want to behave together. So, for example, in my department, we have just finished working on something very similar, where people got together in various forums to describe how they want to, listen openly, not interrupt each other, focus on customer service. So they have built that together. So yes, I do think that it can add a lot of value if employees get together within a small team to do that.
And I'm going to be the devil's advocate and say charters are great. They're one of the biggest things I advocate. However, many charters are done with great energy, and then they become a dead word. You have to make the charters, again, built into your team DNA, or organizational DNA. You might have in meetings people saying, have someone appointed in a meeting that's responsible for charter behavior. You need to revisit them constantly. Yeah. I've seen too many, including even here at UHN, where a great charter, and then people don't even know about it, new hires, et cetera, et cetera. So the ongoing commitment has to be there, an ongoing management supervision of it. The charter is only as good as its follow-up.
Right. You have to keep it alive. Yeah.
Great answers, guys. I'm also wondering, we got two sort of questions. One's on anti-bullying policy and what happens if we don't have one in place, how do we start? And the other part is about how do you recommend sort of measuring success?
You're saying that if somebody wants to develop a bullying policy, how do they go about it? I would say that you got to start first broader. You got to define first the kind of workplace environment that you want to have in your organization. Is it a respectful one? Is it an inclusive one? I think you need to have a statement that says the kind of workplace environment you want to have. And then from that, it would obviously become evident that respect, mental health, well-being of staff is going to be generated out of that discussion of the kind of culture you want to have. And then once you've decided you want to have a respectful culture, then you will need to start working on defining what that means. And bullying is certainly does not fit the culture that you just said you wanted to build. So you will have to define what bullying means, and you will have to include it as a no-no in your policy, and you'll have to include the consequences that, or remedies that you may have in place or that you want to put in place on how to handle that. And then you need to educate your managers and employees on how to handle bullies.
And I'm still very much on the fence about whether it's a good idea for an organization to actually define bullying. Bullying behaviors still are caught within the basket called harassment. So harassment will still cover behavior that's continued. You start defining bullying. So I'm on the fence on this one. I know why the impetus is and why the impulse is to do it, but start defining it, you start seeing more of that phenomena. Plus, workplace investigators will tell you that in many cases where someone comes to HR, to a manager, instead of being bullying, in 25 or 30% of those cases, they find that the person that complained is actually the one that has been the bully. Or they'll find that it's really a conflict that's escalated, and it's just a question of who came first to HR. So I feel that if you have a good enough harassment definition and all the other good things that Emma said, having a vision, having clarity about the culture, then bullying can fit within other things. For me personally, the jury is still out on that one.
The reason we define it is because usually that's the word that people come up with. They hear it in the media, they hear it, outside of the organization. So we define it, but we quickly tell people, but the example you're giving me is not bullying. Bullying is this, and you're talking about incivility. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, in the interest of time, I think we should probably move to the next slide. And what I would encourage everyone to do is sort of discuss a little bit more online. So we actually have, with the Mental Health Commission, a place called Collaborative Spaces, which is an online repository and conversation place for mental health in Canada. And we're hoping that you can sort of ask your questions there. I plan on posting a little bit about how we measure, like how do we recommend measuring success in this area, as well as a lot of the other questions that we weren't able to get to today. Yeah, if you can just go ahead there, Sharone, and move the slide forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
That would be perfect. That's great. So right there you can see where the space is that I'm talking about. That's mentalhealthcommission.ca/English/spaces. We also have Twitter handles there for you. If you turn to the last slide, please. You can see that you can contact us at webinar@mentalhealthcommission.ca. As well, we would like to apologize for the slides not working at the beginning of the presentation today, but we do really want to thank over 225 participants today for joining us. That's amazing. And so we also want to thank Sharone and Emma for taking the time to be with us today, and you really have provided us with some valuable information regarding, civility and incivility in the workplace. So just so that everyone's aware, the next webinar will be discussing family caregivers in the workplace and how workplaces should be thinking about caregiving. And that's on March 26th at noon Eastern Standard Time. And please do go and register. Send this information to your colleagues if you find it useful. And we will be sending out an invitation in the next 2 weeks. Regarding today's slides, you can always email us directly for a copy, but we will also be posting this webinar cast as well as the PDF of the presentations in English and French online. There will also be a survey at the end of this webinar once it closes, and your suggestions are very much appreciated. If you have any other questions, you can email me.
Those who want any articles or anything that we can send to click on that email webinar@mental health.
Yes, thank you so much, Sharone. And thank you so much for joining us to you both. I hope everybody has a fantastic day and learned a lot today.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to everyone for caring and being there today on this webinar.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to answer some of the questions that I see up here.
That's okay. I think we'll get to them online, and definitely we'll interact with Sharone and Emma once these come up. So thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.